So welcome to this week's Optimal Health Clinic Facebook Live. This week I wanted to talk about one of the subtypes in ME chronic fatigue fibromyalgia. And this week I'm talking about the achiever subtype. If this gets a good response and it's popular, then maybe we'll do some of the other subtypes over time as well. If you want to have more context, what I mean when I talk about subtypes, check out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/freedomfromme. And on there you'll find a video, I think various videos, but particularly a video called Subtypes. And it's quite a recent video and it kind of overviews the different subtypes and why they are important. I should also say that if you want to comment, then I will come to questions and comments a little bit later. I'll talk for a little bit first. And also just to give a shout out at the top to the Facebook group that we launched last week, which I think at last look has got over 120 members in the first week and seems really popular. Seems to have quite a lot of activity going on, so definitely check that out if you're interested in connecting with and meeting other people that are kind of sharing the recovery path. So the achiever subtype. Effectively, what the achiever subtype is where we've had a tendency to value ourselves by what we do and what we achieve in the world. So our identity, our self-worth, our self-esteem is derived from basically what we do. So either that be the status of our career or job, be that being someone that's just got an identity of always being busy, be that by our kind of accomplishments in terms of grades we've got at school or grades at kind of university, be that by income. There are lots of ways. It can also be valuing our self-worth by how many friends we have, by how popular we are. But when we when we derive our self-esteem and our self-worth by what we do and what we achieve, what that creates is an energy depleting psychology. So it creates a way of approaching our life where we constantly have to be doing. We always have to be striving, achieving, pushing ourselves to build that sense of self-worth, which is important to any of us in terms of feeling good about ourselves. And this is certainly not the cause of ME chronic fatigue fibromyalgia. It's often a factor for some people in causing someone to get sick. And it certainly plays a significant factor in the role of the recovery process. One of the things that I talked about a couple of weeks ago was the place of bouncing the boundaries. So building a solid, stable baseline from which we can gradually start to build and improve our recovery. And one of the things that's most significant in jeopardizing building a solid baseline is the fact that we're constantly trying to push too far too fast. So we're always trying to be ahead of where we actually are on the recovery path at that point. In fact, we measure how well we're doing on the recovery path by how much we can push ourselves to do on that particular day. So building self-awareness around the achiever pattern and being able to be effective in starting to change and work with the achiever pattern is partly important in what's caused us to get sick. It's partly important in what's getting in the way of pacing effectively and managing to gradually build up our activity when we're ready to do that in a sustainable way. And it's also a key factor in preventing relapse on the other side of recovery, because if we recover and then we go back and we recreate all of the circumstances that cause us to burn out in the first place, it doesn't guarantee a relapse, but it certainly gives you a much better probability, let's say, of having a relapse. And it's not just, our work at the Optimal Health Clinic is not just about supporting recovery, it's about supporting sustained recovery over many years, not just, so you can feel great for a period of time and then things crash back down again. So the kind of understanding what this pattern is and being able to identify it is one of the things which is most tricky. And in a minute, I'll come to some of the things that you can do to help get free from it. But kind of the headline is, like many of the other subtypes and many things, if you can see it, you don't have to be it. So the more self-awareness we have, the more we can identify and see achiever patterns when they're coming in, then we actually have a choice. We either go down that path or we have the choice to go down a different path. But I also wanted to just speak to a few of the other ways that the achiever pattern can play out on the recovery path, because I think it's interesting, but it's also important. So one of the things that we can see a lot of, and it's something that I was extremely guilty of in my recovery. In fact, in many ways, it's probably one of the things I would most significantly want to go back and change, is trying to achieve at the path of recovery. What that can look like is trying to be the perfect Optimum Health Clinic patient in such a way that it's like it becomes such an obsession that your whole life becomes around recovering and getting better and doing that the best you can, and always eating the perfect diet and always doing meditation practice and always doing stops and always doing EFT. And it becomes like a never-ending pile of things that you're putting pressure on yourself to achieve at. And the very way that you're approaching the recovery path is such that it actually is it's inhibiting recovery rather than supporting recovery. So yeah, one of the key things is identifying when we're trying to achieve at the recovery path. The next thing is, this was the thought that I was working with a patient this afternoon, and it was a thought that triggered the idea of doing this as the Facebook Live tonight, which is when the achiever pattern hijacks periods of progress. So what I mean by that is, let's say we calm down our nervous system, we get our pacing really together, we're very carefully bouncing the boundaries, we've been doing work on the nutrition side and our energy is up and our toxicity is down and our digestion's better. So all of these things are working. And then we go for a period where we notice we genuinely have real energy to be able to do more. So we're expanding what we're doing, not because we're pushing ourselves, not because we're trying to achieve and we're trying to kind of force ourselves. We genuinely have more energy to do more. But then what happens is our achiever starts to hijack the progress that we're making. So we start to say things to ourselves like, well, I feel so much better doing more, so if I push myself to do even more, then I'll feel even better. Or we start to notice that our self-esteem starts to feel better because we can look back and we can see progress. And then we start to think of all the things that we haven't been able to do, like the kind of built-up frustration of all these things we've not been able to do. And then it's like, well, if I could just go and see those friends, I would feel such a sense of achievement, I would feel so much better, that suddenly something's changed. We've gone from the fact that we're doing more because we really have got more energy, to the fact that we're now doing more because our achiever has hijacked that. And it's almost like we're starting to convince ourselves that we could do more because we were pushing ourselves, even though the progress was the opposite. And so what you see is the achiever pattern hijacking genuine progress. And then what starts to happen after a while is, after a few days or a few weeks, whatever of this, we then start to crash again. And then the achiever can even at that point go, well, you just need to push yourself harder. You're feeling tired because you're being lazy or you're worrying about it, and stop your anxiety pattern, just push through and do more. So you sometimes see that genuine progress is hijacked by the achiever, and the crash is caused by the hijacking of the achiever, that we were going up gradually and then we started trying to push it. So that's a really helpful thing to look out for when your achiever is hijacking real progress that you're making. So how do we get free from the achiever pattern? Now, obviously, this is a lot more than I can talk about in a kind of just brief kind of Facebook Live, but I wanted to offer some orientation and just a few kind of some reflections and some ideas to take on board. So I think one of the things here which is really important is, who are you without your achievements? If you identify with this pattern and you can see that your identity and what you do and what you achieve in the world is perhaps more important to you than it might be for other people in their lives. The question is, who would you be without that? So if you didn't have all that stuff, and one of the things that ME chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia can somewhat brutally do is it can strip away all the things that we're used to achieving at. And I should say that the irony of that is people will sometimes say, well, I used to be an achiever, but I'm not anymore because I can't achieve at anything. But what you're actually seeing is all the qualities of the achiever are completely there in their life. Like they're lying in bed, frustrated and putting pressure on themselves and feeling crap about themselves. So even though you're not physically achieving things in the world, the energy of the achiever is still very much there. And we're still very much putting pressure on ourselves. So another way to put that is the achiever can show up in fighting being ill, in a resistance and a kind of denial fighting of where we are, as opposed to an acceptance and settling and relaxing in to where we actually are. So anyway, going back to how do we start to get free from it? So one of the things is this question of who would we be without our achiever? And starting to build a sense of self-esteem which is built on something more solid, that is built on our inherent worth and value as a person, as opposed to a list of achievements and accomplishments in the world. Some things that can help towards that are dealing with our inner critic, so that voice inside of our mind that's always judging us and telling us we're crap, we're stupid, we're shit, all those things. If we can take that away, it allows more space for who we are to show up and open up. Working with our emotional history, things like EFT, can be a really helpful way just to kind of calm the system and settle the stuff that's in there. Living a life which is more authentic to what truly brings us joy and happiness, as opposed to living the life that other people tell us we should be living. So something about really living on our own purpose and our own truth is really important, because if we're living the life that we were told we should live and we're achieving all that stuff, it's not going to matter to us. But if we're doing the things that we really care about and really do matter to us, that's going to give us a different kind of self-worth and self-esteem. I mentioned before, if you can see it, you don't have to be it. So the more self-awareness, we can start to make different choices. And that's where learning to really break the habit can be really helpful. And there's lots of tools that we teach in the psychology side at Optimal Health Clinic around identifying patterns or stopping them and shifting thought processes. So all of that material can be extremely helpful. So learning to deal with the emotional side, building true self-worth, calming down all the kind of inner critic stuff and breaking the patterns of what's doing can go a long way towards getting some freedom from it. But then one of the questions that comes up, this is my kind of final point I wanted to make before if you guys want to put any questions on here, and questions as much as you can specifically related to what I'm talking about. It is people. One of the questions people ask is, if I don't have my achiever pattern, will that mean I'll lose all of my drive and motivation in the world? Will it mean that I'll kind of just become kind of like I don't really care, or have nothing that I'm really passionate about? And I would say that it's the opposite. There may be a period where you lose the wrong sort of motivation, and for a while you kind of can feel a little bit like you're not sure what's important for you and where you go. But true motivation doesn't have to be driven by a sense of not feeling like we're enough and not feeling good enough. We can feel compelled by things not so much in our ego and our sense of that, but our heart and our instincts and like what we genuinely feel love for. Like, you know, we don't need to feel bad about ourselves to enjoy the love of another, or we don't need to feel that that if we are not if we're not driving ourselves and pushing ourselves, that there's not another way to do things. In fact, if you look at true strength, for example, and you can see bodybuilders that have huge muscles, and then if you actually look at people that have real power, there's muscle, but it isn't about having massive inflated muscle. What it's about is having true power that's there. And one of the things that I found back in the day that I had this massive sense of trying to achieve to feel like it was defining my self-worth, that I was like running all over the place trying to achieve at everything, as opposed to being much more clear and much more strategic of what actually really matters. And doing things from a much cleaner, much healthier, much more sustainable place makes a huge difference. And so it is possible to absolutely have ambition in the world and to in a fully embodied way, pursue that and go after that, but in a way which is healthy and sustainable. But we have to work through the kind of unhealthy achiever to free up and make space for the healthy achiever. And as I said at the start, doing that is dealing with the facts that cause us to get sick in the first place. It's also dealing with a major block to be able to sustainably work on pacing and work forwards. But it's also dealing with a thing that can cause relapse on the other side of recovery. So this is not relevant for everyone to the same degree. For some people, this could be the most important part of their recovery path. For other people, it might be one of many factors, or maybe one of the smaller factors. But I really do think it's an important and helpful thing to reflect upon. So just looking back at questions and comments. So hi to Tracy and Vanessa and Jenny's put a question. I'm just going to quick read. The older I get, the harder I find it to come out of the bad episodes of ME fibromyalgia. I feel very frustrated about this. I live in Glasgow. I've not been able to find a specialist in this field. So trying to get through on my own and finding very difficult. So Jenny, I would say bear in mind that at the Oxford Health Clinic, we work with patients in 35 countries using telephone and video Skype. So definitely, if you haven't already, reach out for an information pack and a free 15-minute chat. Saying hi to Liz and to Vanessa and Jean. So yeah, if any of you guys have any questions, then feel free to post them now. And if they come up in the next kind of 30 seconds or so, then I can answer them in the session now. Otherwise, I will look at the comments again later on this evening or otherwise tomorrow morning. And also just to encourage you guys, you might want to share what was helpful about this in the Facebook group. If you are, great Jenny. If you haven't already joined that, you'll find the link below the video from last week. It's in the comments down there. Yeah, it'll be good to share your own insights on what's been helpful for you guys in building awareness around your achiever and what's helped you perhaps get some freedom from it and progress and move forwards. So hopefully that's been helpful. Thank you everyone for joining live. I hope you, if you're not live watching the recording, that's been useful. And as I say, please do post questions and share your experiences in our Facebook group. Thanks for watching.